Humanity has split the atom and mapped the genome, yet some of us still get defeated by a fork and a wall socket. This video is a field guide to evolutionary dead ends. We're about to explore 10 case studies of terminal stupidity. Before we begin, a necessary warning. Do not view these stories as a how-to guide, but rather as a comprehensive instruction manual on how not to exist. 1. In the grand chaotic lottery of the internet, there are two paths to fame. Create something truly brilliant, or do something so monumentally stupid that the world simply has to watch. Our first contestant, a young man from Brazil we'll call Marco, was a devout practitioner of the latter. Marco wasn't just dreaming of his 15 minutes of fame, he was ready to hold it hostage with a can of spray paint. His arena was YouTube, his ambition was viral stardom, and his chosen talent was a catastrophic misunderstanding of chemistry. He had discovered the art of hydro dipping, a genuinely mesmerizing technique where you coat an object by dipping it into a film of paint floating on water. It's used to create stunning patterns on things like guitar bodies and engine covers, things that are notably inanimate and do not require oxygen. Marco, however, saw this, and a light bulb didn't just go on over his head. It short-circuited and set fire to his common sense. He decided he was going to hydro dip his own head. This wasn't just a stunt for him. It was performance art. He was the artist, the canvas, and, as it would turn out, the tragic masterpiece. His character profile was simple. A man whose desire for validation from strangers was about to override every self-preservation instinct hardwired into human DNA. He treated safety warnings like he treated software terms and conditions, as a block of text you scroll past to get to the I agree button. The stage was set in his bathroom, a location that had seen its share of bad ideas, but nothing on this scale. With his phone propped up and recording, he began the preparations. He emptied can after can of neon spray paint onto the surface of his bathtub water, transforming it into a shimmering, toxic soup that looked like a psychedelic oil spill. Now, let's pause for a quick public service announcement for anyone else considering a career in high-stakes idiocy. Spray paint is essentially liquid plastic. When it cures, it creates a non-porous, waterproof, and most importantly, airtight seal. That's its entire job. The human head, by contrast, has several critical holes in it, specifically designed to let air in and out. Sealing those holes is less of a cool party trick and more of a speed run to the afterlife. Marco, oblivious to this fundamental conflict of engineering, saw only his shimmering portal to glory. He gave the camera a confident thumbs up, took one last deep, life-affirming breath of beautifully unpainted air, and plunged his head into the chemical rainbow. For the first few seconds, everything probably felt like a success. He held his head under, letting the paint film wrap around his skin. Then, he pulled it out, ready for his grand reveal. But the triumphant moment he had envisioned was instantly replaced by a silent, suffocating horror. The paint had performed its function with terrifying efficiency. It had created a perfect, custom-molded, airtight mask over his entire face, sealing his nostrils and mouth shut with the precision of a vacuum sealer. He had effectively shrink-wrapped his own head. Panic set in. He clawed at his face, but the rapidly curing enamel was smooth and slick. His frantic, muffled gasps for air were trapped behind a vibrant, colorful prison. The final recorded footage wasn't a viral stunt, but a silent, horrifying ballet of a man being defeated by a craft project. He had chased internet immortality, and in a way, he caught it. The video became a grim cautionary tale, a digital tombstone for a man who died for the algorithm. He finally went viral, just not in the way he'd planned. 2. Deep in the Indian countryside, where the line between ingenuity and insanity can get dangerously thin, a man we'll name Raj faced a problem as old as time itself. A massive, pulsating beehive, dripping with nature's sweetest nectar, located inconveniently high in a tree. Raj was a man of simple tastes and even simpler solutions. He saw life not as a series of complex challenges requiring forethought, but as a collection of things that just needed to be hit with a very long stick. And on this particular day, the problem was a beehive, and his solution was a 20-foot-long aluminum irrigation pipe. Now, a more cautious man might have considered the inhabitants of said beehive. thousands of tiny winged soldiers armed with poison-tipped spears, all fiercely dedicated to protecting their queen and their honey. A slightly more intelligent man might have noticed the thick black high-voltage power lines running through the dense foliage of the very same tree. Raj, however, was neither of these men. He operated on a level of primal confidence that made him immune to concepts like consequences or the fundamental laws of electricity. His psychological profile was one of pure, unfiltered impulse. He was the human equivalent of a car with no brakes, rolling downhill towards a cliff. The villagers, seeing Raj march towards the tree with the glistening metal pole on his shoulder, immediately began shouting. They were waving their arms in the universal, cross-cultural gesture for the love of God, you are a moron who is about to die. Raj naturally interpreted this as a crowd of adoring fans cheering on his bold endeavor. He was the hero of this story, after all. Let's have a brief science lesson for anyone who, like Raj, might have been absent during the Don't Mix Metal and Electricity chapter of life. Aluminum is an excellent conductor. This is great when you want to make a frying pan, but terrible when you want to poke things near a power line. High-voltage cables carry a charge so powerful it can jump through the air to find a path to the ground. If you happen to be that path, your life expectancy is measured in milliseconds. Raj, with the grim determination of a man wrestling with a jar of pickles, began his assault. He jabbed the massive pole up into the branches, aiming for the hive. The bees were a problem for future Raj. Present Raj was focused on the sweet, sweet honey. He thrusted the pole upwards through the leaves, a silver spear aimed at the heart of his sugary desire. And then, the pole made contact. It wasn't with the beehive. It was with the unseen, humming power line. The universe, which had been patiently waiting for this moment, did not disappoint. A sound like a thunderclap ripped through the air as 11,000 volts found their new favorite conductor. The electricity shot down the pole and through Raj's body, treating his nervous system like a superhighway to the ground. In that instant, he ceased to be a man and became a biological fuse box, experiencing a level of enlightenment so profound it was fatal. The light show was brief, but the lesson was eternal. In the aftermath, the villagers were left with a powerful new piece of local folklore about why you don't fight a tree with a metal stick. The bees, completely unharmed, continued their work, probably a little confused by the brief flash of light and the smell of ozone. And Raj? Raj achieved his goal of making contact with a higher power, just not the one he was expecting. 3. In the quiet, manicured lawns of suburban America, a new kind of apex predator was emerging. The homeowner armed with a Wi-Fi connection and a dangerously inflated sense of expertise. Meet Brenda, a woman who had recently decided to become the alpha of her two-dog pack, which consisted of a pair of enormous, goofy, and utterly devoted Rottweilers. She hadn't spent years studying animal behavior or apprenticing with professionals. No, Brenda had achieved her doctorate in canine psychology over a single weekend, powered by a series of YouTube videos and a blog run by a man who called himself Wolf Whisperer 27. This internet sage had convinced her that modern dog ownership was all wrong. These weren't pets. They were a repressed wolf pack, and she needed to establish iron-fisted dominance. Her entire worldview was now filtered through this lens of pop psychology nonsense. She would barge through doorways first, stare her dogs into submission, and, most importantly, she had learned the ultimate alpha power move, physically taking food from a subordinate at will. This, according to the Gospel of Wolf Whisperer 27, was the final exam in her quest to become a canine dictator. Let's do a quick deep dive into the actual non-internet brain of a Rottweiler. This is a powerful animal bred for guarding, with jaws that can exert hundreds of pounds of pressure. While they are loyal companions, their software has been in development for 40,000 years. A core part of that software is a very simple program called "That's my food, don't touch it." Attempting to forcibly remove high-value food from a carnivore is not seen as a test of social hierarchy. It's seen as an act of war. Brenda, however, was now fluent in speaking wolf, a language that apparently told her to ignore every warning sign an animal gives you. The moment of truth arrived at dinner time. Tonight's menu wasn't boring kibble, it was 2 thick, raw steaks. This wasn't just food, this was treasure. As her 2 massive dogs began to eat, she approached Zeus, her chosen subject for this grand experiment. As she drew near, Zeus did what any dog on Earth would do. He stopped chewing, went rigid, and a low, guttural growl rumbled in his chest. It was the canine equivalent of a nuclear submarine's warning siren, a clear and unambiguous signal to back away slowly. But to Brenda, the growl was a feature, not a bug. Ah, resistance, she must have thought. Just as the prophecy foretold. This is the test of my alpha energy. She saw the growl not as a desperate plea to be left alone, but as a challenge to her authority. With the misplaced confidence of someone who thinks they can defuse a bomb by cutting the red wire, she plunged her hand down to seize the steak. In that split second, the social contract between human and dog was declared null and void. Zeus was no longer a pet. He was a predator defending a resource from a threat. The reaction was not malicious. It was purely instinctual, a biological reflex executed with horrifying efficiency. The alpha theory had a brief, violent debate with physical reality, and physical reality won by a technical knockout. Her attempt to climb the social ladder of her imaginary wolf pack resulted in her being violently and permanently removed from the top of the food chain. The paramedics who arrived later would find a gruesome scene that served as a stark, final testament to the fact that when you get your life-saving advice from the internet, you should always check the comments section first. 4. There is a fine art to the insurance scam. It requires subtlety, cunning, and a believable story. Our next protagonist, a woman from Naples, Italy, whom we'll call Isabella, possessed none of these qualities. What she had instead was a pile of overdue bills and a plan so breathtakingly stupid it looped all the way around to almost being genius, before crashing violently into the wall of reality. Her grand scheme was to cash in on a generous insurance policy by claiming she had been struck by lightning. It was dramatic, it was an act of God, and best of all, there were no witnesses to dispute it. There was just one tiny logistical hurdle. She had not, in fact, been struck by lightning. This, to Isabella, was a minor inconvenience that could be solved with a little bit of theatrical flair and a complete disregard for the laws of physics. Isabella's character was defined by a magnificent strain of what can only be called low-effort ambition. She approached life's problems with the mindset of a student trying to cheat on an open book test. The answer is right there, but it's easier to just copy from your dumber neighbor. She decided her story needed physical evidence. A simple claim wouldn't be enough. She needed to look the part. A torn shirt? Too simple. A dazed expression? She had that covered naturally. No, she needed the finishing touch. The one thing that would sell the story. Authentic, fresh off the griddle scorch marks. She needed to simulate the electrical burn of a lightning bolt. Now, let's take a quick trip to science class for cheaters. A bolt of lightning is a cataclysmic discharge of millions of volts of direct current, lasting for a fraction of a second. A European wall socket, on the other hand, delivers a steady, relentless 230 volts of alternating current. Comparing the two is like comparing a nuclear explosion to a lit match. One is a force of nature that can turn sand into glass. The other is a force of modern convenience that can turn you into a piece of toast. Electricity has one simple goal in life: to find the fastest route to the ground. When you volunteer your body to be that route, the electricity gratefully accepts your offer, cooking you from the inside out along the way. Isabella, having skipped this particular lesson, rummaged through her kitchen for the perfect lightning simulation tool. Her eyes landed on a metal dinner fork. It was perfect. It had 4 prongs, which, in her mind, meant 4 times the realism. She was an artist, and this was her paintbrush. Her plan was simple: a quick, controlled zap to create a convincing burn, just a little tap to make it look real. She stood in front of the wall socket, fork in hand, a pioneer on the verge of a great, fraudulent discovery. She took a breath, steeled her nerves, and with the conviction of a person who has never had a good idea in their entire life, she jammed the fork into the socket. The effect was not the gentle zap she had envisioned. It was instantaneous and absolute. The 230 volts didn't just give her a little burn, They seized every muscle in her body in an unforgiving grip. The alternating current turned her nervous system into a violently vibrating mess, clamping her hand around the fork in a grip of steel. She had planned to create a small, convincing special effect, but instead, she had mainlined the power grid. The result was far more authentic than she could have ever hoped for. When her neighbors eventually broke down the door, they found a scene that would have certainly convinced an insurance adjuster of an electrical event. Isabella had become a permanent, smoldering part of the Italian power infrastructure. The insurance company never had to investigate her claim. In the end, her policy didn't cover acts of God, but it also had a very specific clause about death resulting from the grossly negligent application of kitchen utensils to a high-voltage power source. 5. Some criminals are masterminds, executing flawless heists with clockwork precision. And then there's our next hero, a man we'll call Leo, whose approach to a life of crime was less Ocean's 11 and more a raccoon stuck in a garbage can. Leo was a petty thief in a small Italian town, a man whose rap sheet was mostly a collection of embarrassing failures. One night, fueled by desperation and a profound lack of planning, he broke into the local bakery. His target, the cash register, the glorious metal box of dreams. He slipped in through an unlocked window, his heart pounding with the thrill of the score. He crept to the front of the shop, pried open the register, and found nothing. A few pathetic coins and a button. The owner wisely had already deposited the day's earnings. This is where a smarter criminal would have cut his losses and fled. But Leo was not a smart criminal. He was a hungry criminal. The smell of the bakery, that intoxicating aroma of sugar and yeast, was overwhelming. And that's when he saw it. In the back room, there were massive tubs filled with dough, slowly rising in preparation for the morning's bread. It was a mountain of soft, pillowy potential. And to Leo's brain, which had now shifted from theft mode to survival mode, it looked like the world's biggest buffet. Let's pause for a moment to discuss the magical, and in this case, malevolent, science of yeast. Yeast is a colony of tiny, single-celled fungi whose life purpose is to consume sugar and release two byproducts, alcohol and carbon dioxide gas. This process, fermentation, is what makes bread rise and beer bubbly. To do its job, yeast needs a warm, moist, nutrient-rich environment. An environment, say, exactly like the inside of a human stomach. When Leo decided to eat the raw dough, he wasn't just having a snack. He was swallowing a biological time bomb. He was turning his own digestive system into a high-efficiency fermentation tank. But he didn't know that. He just saw free food. He didn't just have a bite. He gorged himself, shoveling handful after handful of the sticky, sweet dough into his mouth. He ate a truly heroic, tragically stupid amount. Feeling full and smug, convinced he had gotten the last laugh, he found a comfortable corner in the back of the bakery, lay down, and drifted off to sleep. And as he slept, the yeast woke up. In the perfect 37 degrees Celsius incubator of his stomach, the fungi began to party. They feasted on the sugars and starches, and as they did, they started producing carbon dioxide gas. A lot of it. His stomach began to swell, slowly at first, then with alarming pressure. But that wasn't the only problem. The yeast was also producing ethanol. Leo was unwittingly brewing his own high-proof liquor directly in his stomach, leading to a level of alcohol poisoning that would make a fraternity brother blush. He was trapped in a perfect storm of his own making, being simultaneously inflated like a human parade float from the inside and dying of acute alcohol poisoning. The pressure on his internal organs became immense, restricting blood flow and crushing his diaphragm until he could no longer breathe. His grand heist ended not with a bang, but with a gurgle. When the bakers arrived at dawn, they found a scene of unprecedented weirdness. The cash register was empty, but the real story was the silent, bloated figure in the corner. Leo had broken in to steal money, but ended up paying the ultimate price, a victim of the oldest and deadliest chemical reaction in history. He had become a living testament to the fact that sometimes the greatest danger isn't the law, it's the science of baking. 6. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, especially when that woman has access to a well-stocked garage and a complete absence of rational thought. Enter Sophia, a woman from Milan whose recent discovery of her husband's affair had turned her from a loving wife into a one-woman demolition crew. Her rage, a white-hot supernova of betrayal, needed a target, and she found the perfect one parked in their garage. His gleaming, meticulously restored, vintage Alfa Romeo. This wasn't just a car to him. It was his pride, his joy, his mistress made of steel and leather. And Sophia had decided to grant it a swift and violent divorce from existence. Her character was now one of pure, unadulterated impulse. The part of her brain responsible for long-term planning had clocked out for the day, leaving the rage-fueled lizard brain in complete control. Her mission was simple: inflict the maximum amount of emotional and financial pain by destroying his most prized possession. The rampage began conventionally enough. She ran a key down the side of the car, carving a deep, jagged scar into the perfect red paint. She took a knife to the expensive leather seats, slashing them to ribbons. She even slashed the tires, listening to the satisfying hiss of escaping air. But it wasn't enough. These were flesh wounds. She wanted to kill the car's soul. She wanted to destroy the engine. Her eyes scanned the garage for a new weapon, and she found it: a heavy-duty electric drill. Her plan, hatched in the fiery crucible of her anger, was to drain the car's fluids by drilling a hole directly into the gas tank. Now, we need a quick lesson in Things That Go Boom 101. Gasoline is incredibly volatile. It's not the liquid itself that's the primary danger, but the fumes it constantly releases. These fumes are dense, heavy, and love to linger in enclosed, unventilated spaces, like a garage. When mixed with the right amount of air, gasoline vapor becomes a potent explosive, just waiting for a single spark to set it off. Common sources of sparks include, but are not limited to, a high-speed metal drill bit grinding against a metal gas tank. The car's fuel tank even featured a helpful little pictogram of a flame, a universal symbol for warning. This substance is extremely explosive. To Sophia, this was no longer a warning. It was a suggestion. With the drill in hand, she knelt beside the car. She was an artist of destruction, about to sign her name on her masterpiece. She pressed the tip of the drill bit against the underside of the tank and squeezed the trigger. For a beautiful fraction of a second, her plan worked. The drill whirred to life, and a shower of brilliant orange sparks erupted as metal met metal. And then, those sparks met the dense cloud of gasoline vapor that had been patiently waiting for them. The result wasn't a fire. It was an explosion. A deafening whoomp of a fuel-air detonation that turned the entire garage into a concussive fireball. The explosion blew the garage door clear across the driveway and engulfed the Alfa Romeo, and Sophia along with it, in a plume of incandescent rage. When the fire crews arrived, they found a scene of absolute carnage. The prized car was a blackened, twisted husk, barely recognizable. Sophia's quest for vengeance had been a stunning success, but it was a murder-suicide in which the only victim was herself. The ultimate irony? Her cheating husband was miles away, completely safe. Her grand, final act of defiance didn't even singe a hair on his head. She had intended to be the final, devastating chapter in his story, but instead, she just became a very loud, very brief footnote. 7. In the concrete jungle of New York City, the construction site is a world governed by a few very simple, very strict laws. The most important of these is the law of gravity, a tireless enforcer that has never once taken a coffee break. Our next subject, a demolition worker we'll call Sal, believed he had found a loophole in this law. Sal's job was part of a two-man tango of destruction. He would slice through massive steel I-beams with a cutting torch, and his partner, Tony the crane operator, would then lift the severed pieces away. They had a system, a beautiful, idiot-proof system honed by years of not dying. Step 1. Sal cuts the beam. Step 2. Sal walks to a clearly marked bright yellow safe zone, a safe distance away. Step 3. Sal gives the universal all-clear thumbs-up signal. Step 4. Tony, trusting this signal as if it were a sacred vow, pulls the beam away. This system had one fatal flaw. It accounted for every variable except for human impatience. Sal was a man whose internal clock was permanently set 5 minutes ahead of reality. He viewed safety regulations not as life-saving procedures, but as annoying suggestions from people who didn't understand the urgent, pressing need for him to get to a bar for happy hour. On this particular sweltering afternoon, with the end of his shift tantalizingly close, Sal made the final cut on a multi-ton beam. It hung there, precariously balanced, a monster held in place by sheer friction. He was supposed to move to the safe zone, but then he saw it, his favorite wrench, lying on the ground just on the other side of the beam he had just freed. A lesser man might have considered the long, safe walk around. But Sal was a genius of efficiency. An idea sparked in his brain, a shortcut so brilliant he was probably amazed no one had thought of it before. He could give Tony the all-clear signal now, and in the few seconds it took for the crane to start pulling, he could duck under, grab the wrench, and be back in the safe zone. He would save, by his calculation, a solid 20 to 30 seconds. He looked up at the crane cab, gave a big, confident thumbs up, a gesture that screamed, "I am in complete control of this situation." Tony, seeing the signal he had trusted for years, engaged the crane. The gears groaned, the cables tightened, and the massive I-beam began to move. But it didn't go straight up. It swung, just an inch at first, then with the gathering momentum of a wrecking ball. Sal, mid-lunge for his wrench, looked up just in time to see several tons of American-made steel swinging directly towards his head. In that final, crystal-clear moment of horrifying realization, he must have understood the true value of 30 seconds. The massive beam met him exactly where he stood, delivering a physics lesson so potent and final that it was instantly fatal. His shortcut didn't just end his shift early, it ended his entire subscription to life. When the dust settled, the site was silent, save for the gentle creak of the swinging beam. His precious wrench lay untouched, a gleaming monument to the dumbest cost-benefit analysis in human history. 8. A Russian wedding is an endurance sport, a glorious marathon of vodka, questionable dancing, and escalating dares. It is a place where good ideas go to die and bad ideas are celebrated with a toast. It was in this perfect environment that a guest named Dmitri decided he was going to perform a prank so legendary it would be spoken of for generations. Dmitri was a man who considered himself a comedic artist, but whose medium was chaos. His fatal flaw was a desperate, unquenchable thirst for attention. While others were content with dancing, Dmitri needed to be the main event. His grand idea was born when he saw it lurking in the venue's utility room, a massive industrial-grade laundry dryer. This wasn't your friendly neighborhood Maytag. This was a stainless steel beast designed to dry heavy, wet tablecloths with brutal, high-temperature efficiency. And Dmitri saw it as the perfect stage for his masterpiece. His plan was simple, in the way a train wreck is simple. He would hide inside the dryer, wait for one of his friends to come by, and then burst out, scaring them half to death. Comedy gold. Now, let's talk about the engineering of this machine. Industrial dryers are built with safety features designed to protect the laundry, not the prankster. They have heavy, spring-loaded doors with powerful auto-locking mechanisms. Once that door closes, it's locked until the cycle is complete. Furthermore, many models are designed to automatically start the cycle the second the lock engages. This is for efficiency, a concept Dmitri was about to become intimately familiar with. But he had a plan to defeat this engineering. He found a piece of flimsy folded cardboard, the perfect tool for a man of his intellectual caliber, and used it to prop the heavy door open just a crack. He squeezed himself inside the metallic drum, pulling the door almost shut behind him. He was now a comedic genius in a metal cocoon, waiting for his moment. He shifted his weight, trying to get comfortable for the wait, and that's when his brilliant plan began to unravel. His movement dislodged the flimsy piece of cardboard. With a heavy, final thud, the door slammed shut. The locking mechanism engaged with a decisive, metallic click. And then, a low hum filled the small space as the machine, doing exactly what it was designed to do, automatically began its high-heat, heavy linens cycle. The initial hum was probably confusing, but it was quickly replaced by the terrifying tumble of the drum and a blast of hot air. Dmitri's prank had gone horribly, irreversibly wrong. He had brilliantly managed to trap, lock, and cook himself in a single, fluid motion. His desperate, muffled cries were lost in the roar of the machine. He had set out to be the life of the party, but in the end, he became the laundry. When his friends finally found him, the prank was over. It was, in a grim way, his most successful performance ever. Nobody saw the punchline coming, and Dmitri got the standing ovation he always wanted, just from the local coroner. 9. In the shadowy world of illegal animal trafficking, there are criminal masterminds, and then there are guys like Klaus. Klaus was a German tourist with a scheme so clever, so intricate, he was sure it was foolproof. His plan was to smuggle a dozen rare exotic parrots out of South America. He had the buyers, he had the birds, but he had one major problem. Parrots are, by nature, loud, squawking alarm systems. He needed a way to sedate them for the flight. The professional solution, of course, would be to consult a veterinarian for the proper avian tranquilizer and dosage. But that was expensive and would create a paper trail. Klaus, a man who combined arrogance with extreme cheapness, scoffed at the idea. He had a better way. He would use his own personal extra-strength prescription sleeping pills. Now, we must pause for a lesson in pharmacology and basic math. A sleeping pill designed to sedate a 200-pound German man contains a dosage that is astronomically high for a 300-gram bird. Conversely, the minuscule amount needed to make a parrot drowsy would be harmless to a full-grown human, unless that human were to be repeatedly exposed to it. The human mouth, with its thin mucous membranes, is remarkably efficient at absorbing chemicals directly into the bloodstream. Klaus, armed with this critical lack of information, set up his makeshift veterinary clinic in his cheap hotel room. He crushed several of his powerful pills into a fine powder and dissolved it in a bottle of water, creating a potent sedative cocktail. The next problem was administration. A syringe would be stressful for the birds and potentially noisy. This is where Klaus's genius truly shone. He would use his own mouth as a gentle, organic dropper. He took a small swig of the sedative-laced water, held it in his mouth, and then, approaching each parrot like a nurturing mother bird, he carefully squirted a tiny, controlled amount into each of their beaks. One by one, the birds grew quiet and sleepy. His plan was working perfectly. He was a genius. He repeated this process for all 12 birds. With each spit take of sedative, he was administering a tiny dose to a parrot, and simultaneously absorbing a small, seemingly insignificant amount himself. After the last bird was peacefully asleep, Klaus sat back, immensely proud of his clever, cost-effective solution. He felt a little drowsy, but he figured it was just the stress of being an international criminal mastermind. He decided to lie down for a quick nap before heading to the airport. It was a nap from which he would never wake up. The cumulative dose of the powerful sedative he had absorbed had been slowly building in his system. It wasn't a sudden event, but a slow, gentle descent as his central nervous system and respiratory functions were gradually suppressed until they ceased altogether. When hotel staff entered his room the next day, they discovered a bizarrely peaceful scene. Klaus, lifeless on the bed, surrounded by a dozen drowsy but very much alive parrots, who were just beginning to wake up from their nap. He had successfully sedated his entire smuggling operation, with himself as the only casualty. His brilliant plan had worked on the birds, but it had worked even better on him. 10. There exists in our modern world a new kind of blindness. It doesn't affect the eyes, but the entire consciousness, a self-imposed sensory deprivation delivered through a glowing 6-inch screen. Our final exhibitor is a tourist in California, a man we'll call Gary, who became the poster child for this very modern affliction. Gary was visiting a spectacular coastal park, a place of breathtaking cliffs and majestic ocean views, a place designed by nature to make you feel small and awestruck. Gary, however, was experiencing this natural wonder entirely through his phone. He wasn't there to see the cliffs. He was there to post pictures of the cliffs, to prove to his followers that he was having an authentic, awe-inspiring experience that he himself was completely missing. His reality wasn't the fresh sea air or the cry of the gulls. It was the endless scroll of his social media feed. His character was not one of malice or even traditional stupidity, but of a profound terminal distraction. The physical world had become a mere backdrop for his digital life. As he ambled along the cliffside path, his thumbs were a blur of activity. liking photos, commenting on memes, replying to texts. He was so engrossed in this digital conversation that he failed to notice the series of very real, very analog warnings that society had placed in his path. The first was a large, friendly sign with a helpful pictogram of a person falling off a cliff. Gary walked right past it, probably while chuckling at a cat video. A little further on, there was a more insistent sign, this one with bold yellow letters screaming, "Danger, unstable cliff edge." Gary treated it like a pop-up ad, his brain automatically filtering it out as irrelevant information. Then came the low wooden fence, the last physical suggestion that perhaps one should not proceed further. Gary simply sidestepped it, his eyes still glued to the screen. These warnings are the physical manifestation of accumulated tragedy, a dialogue between the past and the present that says, "People have died here. Please don't be next." Gary had put this dialogue on mute. He was in a conversation with someone 1,000 miles away, and that conversation was more real to him than the rapidly approaching edge of a 600-foot drop. And then he took the final step. His forward foot, which for the last 10,000 steps had met the reassuring resistance of solid earth, suddenly found nothing but air. There was likely a brief, horrifying moment of cognitive dissonance, where the physical sensation of falling finally broke through the digital haze. It was reality's last, most brutal push notification. The fall was silent and swift, and the final impact was absolute. When rescue crews later located his body at the base of the cliff, they reportedly found his phone a few feet away. According to the network data, the very last thing his phone did before losing signal was attempt to send one final, tragically incomplete message to a friend. The message contained a single, auto-corrected word: "Whoops." He had spent his final moments completely connected to a network of millions, and yet had died utterly disconnected from the one thing that mattered: the ground beneath his feet. He missed every warning, every desperate attempt by the real world to save him, all for the sake of a screen. His final status update had been posted, not with his thumbs, but by the unforgiving laws of gravity. These 10 stories prove that the human brain is the most dangerous weapon on the planet. And now, a challenge for the comments. We are officially nominating one of these individuals for the Darwin Award Hall of Fame. Your job is to argue which of these 10 people was the least stupid. Defend your chosen candidate with ruthless logic. If our disbelief in your argument makes us laugh, you might just win.